Welcome back to Mark Holubus Vlog. Thanks for joining in on this beautiful, beautiful day. But the way it has it, the weather is a little bit rough outside today, so I felt compelled to bring you guys into my garage. That's right here, the Lamborghini is parked in the garage. And today I really want to address the fact that you guys can actually afford a Lamborghini a lot easier than you probably thought you could. And I'm here to explain how I was able to afford it and how I got to the point where I am today. But with all of that said, you realize that no two Lamborghinis are alike. We really have to dive into that because if you want to consider buying a Lambo, there's certain cars that you might want to consider and others you really want to steer away from unless you have a whole lot of expendable cash. But let's dive right into this because the Lamborghini brand as a whole is really one of my favorite brands of cars, period, bar none. It always has been since growing up. And even as I transition into supercar ownership, I've always had my eyes and my sights set on Lamborghinis. I've always loved Ferraris. I've always loved Porsches. As a matter of fact, I've had Porsches for years. And there's a lot of great Porsches out there available in the markets, of course. You can get into a great 911, 997 generation for reasonable money. But honestly, Lamborghinis always touched me here. And I really want to talk about how much a car like this would cost you today in Canadian and US dollars and whether you can actually afford it. Because it's not just about buying these cars outright. It's actually about holding on to them for 5 years, 10 years possibly. And can you afford the long-term maintenance costs of owning a Lamborghini like this? After all, they aren't cheap. There's no cheap Lamborghini. There's more affordable versions, and we're going to talk about that today. So let's really just roll right into it. If you guys have seen some of my recent videos, I've really spent some time at Ed's shop, my favorite mechanic. He's got a Murcielago. Actually, the way it stands, last time you saw in the last video, the car had stalled on the side of the road. It had some stalling issues. There were some problems there, and some of it had to do with sensors. And unfortunately, sensors in those cars are often buried in spots that are very awkward. As a matter of fact, a lot of parts in those cars are buried in awkward spots. And when the unfortunate part of that means sometimes the engine has to come out for service just to gain access to some of those parts. And even more awkward to that is when the engine comes out, the gearbox has to come out with it, and it becomes a really, really expensive job. And herein lies the cars that you probably have to really think twice about before buying if you're on a relatively strapped budget and you just want to get into the sampling the Lamborghini marketplace. Because the V12 Lamborghinis is not where you want to start unless you have a lot of cash. Again, Murcielagos. To do a clutch, and I talked about it in the last video, to do a clutch, which is very common on those cars, is going to cost you in that range from $20,000 to $30,000 to do. So consider that. That's a big one. Now, inherently, those cars aren't that unreliable, but again, there are parts and pieces that are buried in the engine compartment, and you just have to really pull the engine out to gain access to it. Now, that brings us to why I picked up a Gallardo like this. Well, these cars, while they're not perfect, they do have their weak points, and I can touch on that in a moment here. A lot of the servicing that is available on these cars is able to be done with the engine in the car. That's right. See, where the Murcielago has the gearbox in front of the engine, this car has the gearbox behind the engine. So in other words, to do a clutch job, it's removal of the bumper, pull the gearbox apart, and there you have it. Lo and behold, you're in front of the clutch. And it becomes a much less invasive job, whereas a Murcielago, everything has to come out, and it's going to cost you big bucks. $25K for a Murci clutch, $10K for a Gallardo clutch. It's as simple as that. And everything else is sort of consistent with that. Most other parts with a Murcielago are going to cost you twice, 3 times, 4 times as much money as they would on a Gallardo in most cases. The beauty is a Gallardo is almost as fast as a Murci and carries almost as much fanfare. Now, of course, a Murci is a V12 with the big doors. You'll never replace that. That has the bragging rights. So if you want that, you've got to go to the V12 cars. But if you want to get into the Lamborghini feel, the essence, the performance, the sound, you don't need to go all in. You can get into one of these. Now, say you want something a little newer, and as a matter of fact, I've been shopping around myself. The Gallardos are so easy to like because they're sort of old school yet. They're the transition point from the old Lamborghinis to the new Lamborghinis. There's far less electronics. There's far less to fail on them. And so there's actually a lot to like about these, and it's not just because they're more affordable. Huracans are better all day long, but they're the transitionary car from this. When the Gallardo was replaced in 2014, the Huracan stepped into its place. They're both V10 cars. They both have gearboxes behind the engine. And they're both largely based on the same chassis. So honestly, for double the money, you can get into a Huracan, but you don't necessarily need that. If you just want to feel the Lambo right here, 80, 90 grand, 100 grand, you can get into one of these. Huracan, 200 plus to get into a used one, a 2015, 2016 kind of first generation Huracans. Now the Huracans, you've got to understand, are a better car in a lot of ways. They have a far, far better gearbox. That's one of the Achilles on these bad boys, is the crappy e-gear gearbox. And that's basically an automated manual. It's in essence electric system forcing a series of hydraulic lines, forcing the gearbox to move in different directions and giving you your shifting capability. And of course, it's a sequential gearbox, so you can't go from first to fourth. You basically have to go sequentially 1, 2, 3, 4 and 4, 3, 2, 1. Now with a Huracan, it's a dual clutch. It's a double clutch transmission, and so it's lightning fast, you've got launch control, and it's far more robust. It also lasts a lot longer than the clutch system in these cars. So in other words, it's a lot better for a daily driver and far less hands-on to keep running on the road. But again, you're paying the money. You can get two of these for the price of a Huracan, and it's not worth two of these cars. Trust me when I say that. These are magnificent. I'd say it's worth 25% more than this, but that's a newer car, so if you want the Huracan, go for it. They're amazing machines. Now, as I said, these cars are around 100 grand if you want to get into a Murcielago. Don't count on getting into anything for less than $200,000 Canadian. They are a significant amount of money to get into a V12 Lambo. And those are the early cars, you know, a 2004, 2003, with the 6.2 liter V12. They don't have quite as much power. They usually come with the e-gear because manual gated shifters, everybody's hiding those away, so it's hard to find them. And when they do come available, the seller wants an arm and 3 legs for it. So it's almost cost prohibitive to even get into a decent Murcielago, particularly a gated shifter. Then you look into what else is available. Well, you get into the older stuff, Diablos and Countaches, then you get more vintage, and they're phenomenal cars, but be prepared for the maintenance because those cars, they're fragile, they're dainty, and because they're getting older, they will require a little bit more maintenance. Then you go newer and you can get an Aventador, and those are by far the best Lamborghinis available with value added in there. Of course, they're awesome cars. Scissor doors, V12 cars, 700 horsepower plus, all-wheel drive. They're absolutely magnificent. They steal a show anywhere you drive. When the Aventador, you roll into a parking lot, guaranteed to draw a crowd. They are the car to own. But again, you really can't get into one for less than $300,000 Canadian. And so they're still holding a premium. But if resale's your game, get into an earlier one. 13, 14, 15. Get into one of those generations. Make sure you get a low mile car. And they will hold value. You won't lose a whole lot of cash. So an Aventador is a good way to get in if you're worried about some level of depreciation. If you're worried about maybe resale later on down the road, that's probably your best bet in the Lamborghini world. Now, how did I get to Lamborghini? Other than the fact that growing up, I'd seen them on the posters. You remember the Countach? You'd see those often on the posters in International Stereo. You'd see that red Countach with the Alpine stereo. That is where I originally got my idea about getting into a Lamborghini. I love those from the day I saw it. I had a poster in my room, and I had to get one. I even told my old man that I was going to buy one day. So here we are. I bought a Lamborghini. Now, did I look at the Ferraris? Absolutely. But considering $100,000, $150,000, what are you going to get into Ferrari land? Well, now unfortunately 360s are moving up in price, and I'm not sure why. For 400 horsepower, you get the essence of Ferrari, but I think it's a little bit underpowered for what you're getting. The 430s are nice cars. They're competitive with this. They also have about 500 horsepower, or about 493, but they're close enough. Comparable horsepower, but the rear-wheel drive, you can get an F1, you can get a gated shifter. They're great cars, but because they're the last car available in the Ferrari world with a manual shifter, they're also climbing in value. And quite honestly, Ferraris have never really called my name, and so maybe one day in the future I'll look a little closer at a Ferrari, but for the time being, I'm going to stick with possibly these brands. Now, another car that I've considered is McLaren 650, 720, but we'll get to that in the future. For now, I can honestly tell you guys, think about it. $80,000, $90,000. People are spending that money all day long. Every day you see jacked up diesel 4x4s driving by. You see Denali half tons with fancy rims and a stereo system. You see cars like that every single day. How about BMWs that are a dime a dozen? You get M5s and you can get Audi RS7s, and they're spectacularly fast cars and chock full of technology, and I love those cars, trust me. But if you want to get into the supercar realm, did you realize you can get into a supercar for the same kind of money as a relatively common German Euro sedan, like an M car? Honestly, these cars, there's so much value in these exotics, and I know what the fear is. There's a fear of breakdowns and maintenance and all of that, but trust me when I say, remember, this is when Lamborghini and Audi collaborated. So a lot of the parts inside are either a cross-reference with Lamborghini or either a cross-reference with Audi or Volkswagen. And if you're smart and thrifty, you can actually find a lot of those cross-reference parts. And you're not putting cheaper parts in, jobber parts, by no means. If you buy the Lamborghini part, there is the exact same, say for example, an ignition coil from the Volkswagen bin, that is the exact part. You just have to know how to figure out that cross-reference. You can save a fortune. So that's one benefit. Also, let's not forget that these cars just are inherently built in mass numbers. I mean, there was almost 14,000 Gallardos produced from 2004 to 2014, and because of the mass amount of numbers available, of course, they're a mass-produced car, lots of parts on the shelf, and the parts become slightly lower and more affordable for you and I. So that's a big part and an advantage in owning a Gallardo like this. Another benefit, let's face it, these are at the bottom of the depreciation curve. There's no doubt about it. And because they are, you can get yourself a phenomenal deal and drive the car for 5, 6, 7 years. And I almost guarantee you, unless you wreck it or do something bad to the car, just enjoy it, put a few miles on it here and there. You could probably sell the car in 5 years for the same money you paid. As a matter of fact, the trends show that it may even be slowly rising in value. So at the very least, you'll get in, you'll get out within 5 years, and you may not have any significant loss. Maybe you got to put a clutch in. If you do, that's 10 grand. If you drive the car an average of 2, 3, 4,000 kilometers a year, you could probably still get 5 years out of it. Put a clutch in somewhere in between that lifespan that you've owned the car. And honestly, for 10 grand, that's your cost of ownership. Because most of the other things are just maintenance, standard maintenance, oil changes, fluid changes, spark plugs, things like that, which are not a whole lot more than a lot of other cars. Again, as I said, if you cross-reference some of your parts, it can be very affordable to run one of these. And for people that think it's a pointless waste of money, trust me when I say, have you seen the bills on diesel pickup truck repairs? When you got to pull a cab off of a Ford diesel truck to gain access to a lot of engine parts, what do you think that costs? I had a Ford F350 a couple of years ago, and it blew an injector cup. Well, just to test it, pull part of the head off, basically to gain access to it, pressure test it, replace it. That was like $3,000 to do one injector cup and an injector. How ridiculous is that? So diesel pickup trucks are big bucks. And yes, I know, guys, for you guys saying, hey, but a diesel can make you money. Well, so can these. You put advertising, you affiliate it with a business of some sort, you can make money with this. Trust me, lots of money. There's other creative ways, but I won't even get into that. So there's just different ways you can do that. Now, again, if you guys are hung up on the age of the car, you're looking at a 2004 for $100,000, you're thinking, wow, that's a lot of money for an '04. I get it, guys. There's banks that won't want to lend you 100 grand because it's too high risk. It's an old car. Sometimes insurance companies don't want to insure that. Sometimes, it is what it is. A lot of times it seems like all the barriers are up. But I'll tell you right now, if you can save some money, stage your way up, you can get into one of these cars. As a matter of fact, I promise you I'd share with you how I stepped into this. And it wasn't doling out $100,000 up front. I built up to that. I've owned Porsches for years. I started out with a 911 69, then I sold that, traded up for a 911 SC, that was a 79, then I traded up for an 81 930 Turbo Porsche, which was the 911 Turbo in the generation, traded up, I paid each one off as I went after a couple of years, then I had this 930, I sold it for almost $50,000, $60,000. Now I was within striking distance of the Lamborghini. Now all I needed was $40,000, $50,000, and I was into one of these. Well, then that was a lot easier chunk of change to come up with, and that's just what I did. I was able to have a little bit extra money laying around, plus I sold the Porsche, and all of a sudden, lo and behold, I was into one of these. It's really that simple. Stage your way in. If you got 100 grand, super. Maybe the bank will lend you some money. Either way, it probably doesn't hurt to save some cash. I wouldn't necessarily go in and throw all your life savings into this. Don't live in the car. I mean, ultimately, you have to be able to afford it, either the payments or afford the car outright. I never want to suggest you get into something that's going to drive you into the poorhouse. But if you can afford it, trust me when I say there's not a more rewarding experience than getting into a Lamborghini. You get into the car meets, you meet great people from different walks of life. Some people are extremely wealthy. Some people are like you and I, and we're workhorses and we build to it. There's other people that just, they come from different places, and you just meet a lot of interesting people. And it also brings others asking questions about it. And honestly, and that's what I find so rewarding about it, is the fact that there's people that walk off the street. I've got the car, I'm polishing it up on the driveway. People come around, oh, great car, can I take a look? Take a picture with it or what have you. Sometimes I've let people jump in, take a closer look at it. I mean, part of it is just sharing it, honestly. And it is not an experience I've ever had with a lot of my other vehicles. But with a Lamborghini, it really does get people talking about it. Now, on the flip side, and I can share this in a video down the road, but I've also had some negative responses to the Lamborghini. I mean, for 98% of the time, people are loving these cars. And they give you the time of day, and they want to talk and ask questions, and they're excited, and pictures, and it's all good, thumbs up, everybody's happy. But I've had some less than favorable experiences as well. I've had actually somebody try to steal a car at one point. He was caught. You saw probably a previous video of mine on that. I've also had somebody swearing at me because I'm driving down the road in a busy street, and I'm sitting at a light, and you see some guy on the bus stop screaming and hollering, oh, everybody's got a Lamborghini. Look, another Lamborghini. Everybody's got a Lamborghini. That's not the point. It's not trying to be a show off. I'm just trying to live the life and enjoy the cars, because I've always just loved the way they sound and the way they look. I don't care. It's not about showing off. It's just the experience. It really is. But there's people that assume that you're showing off. As well as I had another situation. I took my wife out. We went out for a nice dinner, sitting out on a patio, and we see some guy walk by pushing his shopping cart. He had a lot of garbage in there. You could tell probably had a tough time. He was dealing with some obviously significant life issues, but he just felt compelled to throw a bunch of food on the back of my car. He just threw a bunch of noodles and food, grabbed it out of his bag and threw it across the back of my car. No reason. My car was parked on the side of the road. Never seen this guy before. Don't know what his deal was, but obviously he wasn't loving it. So, you're always going to have a little bit of that, or somebody that's, going to want to, do something negative to your car or have something negative to say. But again, that's a very, very small amount that you're going to deal with. That's probably in that 2% range. Most people are going to just love the car, and they're just going to have that great dialogue with you. It's not about showing off. It really isn't. It's just something, if you can share with other people. I mean, as a matter of fact, sometimes you can get in some of these local charity runs and you take kids for rides. There's charities in the local area. Every area, I think, does things like that, where they raise funds for people, that are hard done by, or maybe children or sick people, or, for different causes, for example, like cancer, things like that. They will raise money and try to raise cash and run the cars for free. Usually most owners they have to put in money as well to even put their car in there. So it's not even about us making or any of those folks making money. That's not what it's about. It's actually the driver also puts in money, and they're also trying to raise more cash for these charities and, try to do the right thing to try to bring money and focus on these areas that could use attention and fundraising. So there's many, many ways you can enjoy these cars, share it with people. And honestly, that's the bulk of the experience. Not only that, it's just great just to have a car that you go in once a week. It's clean, it's polished. You just get to enjoy it. It's something out of your mundane driving experiences, and it's just something to get excited about. So anyway, guys, like I said, I've paid around $100,000 for the car. I know I can get easily that back. And so that's all I'm trying to say, guys. They are really becoming quite affordable. If you want to get into something more substantial, the V12 Lamborghinis, know this: you will be in for a lot more expense along the way, but those cars certainly have those privileges as well. So, I mean, if that's the way you want to go, I don't blame you. They're great cars. But I just wanted to share with you guys, you really can, that's right, you, me, and even probably my neighbors can get into a Lamborghini with relative ease. And so I'm really just here to say, guys, I'm sure you can if you really want it bad enough. Maybe not today, but if you save and you set that goal, guaranteed 5 years, 2 years, maybe 10 years down the road, whatever that be, it doesn't matter. Set that goal, set that objective, and you can get there as well. It doesn't matter. And everybody's got their own goal. Some people, it's a $100,000 Lambo. The next person, it's a $300,000 Lambo. The next person, it's an SVJ for $700,000. It just depends what your goal is. Set a goal. If you enjoy these cars, make it an objective. You can do it. I've done it. And we're going to keep on trucking, guys. Thanks again, everybody. Please be sure to subscribe. I just enjoy sharing the story with you guys. I really do believe that these cars can be enjoyed by lots of people. And buying one of these cars, enjoying it, and getting the most out of your life. So, and on top of that, guys, be sure to hit that subscribe button down there. And as well, tell all your friends about the channel. I really am trying to build it up. We're going to be bringing lots of great supercar content. Thought I would break it up today from the usual Jag content, but again, the Jag will be back in business here very, very soon. Probably next week, we'll be bringing the Jag back to the channel. Hope to see you guys real soon. Catch you then. Bye-bye.